What do you get when you combine a wormhole, a teleportation system, a mysterious mist, and a bunch of other things? Well, you get Skeleton Crew, of course. So, let's review that. Welcome back to BG's Books. I'm Mr. BG, and today I will be reviewing Skeleton Crew. So, Skeleton Crew is a story collection written by Stephen King, of course, because as you can see from my bookshelf right here, I am obviously quite the Stephen King fan, or constant reader, might I say. Constant reader. But anyway, so Skeleton Crew is a list of stories, and here this bookmark marks where all of them are. So let's just start taking a look at the stories. Alright, so the first story we have here is The Mist. Ooh, okay, so we're starting off with the good one. So basically The Mist, I'm sure you've at least heard of The Mist. You might have seen the movie, you might have read the novella like I have, but you've at least heard of it. And basically The Mist is about people who are trapped in a supermarket with this very terrifying mist, and it has creatures in it and stuff, and they kill people. And so basically if you go out in the mist, you die. So, as I said, this is a novella, not a short story like most of these in here are. But I mean, it's not a quick read. It's only like 5 or 6 hours, so it's only like the first part of this book. But it's really enjoyable. Of course, the movie made it really famous for that really infamous ending that the novella does not have, so don't worry about that. But yeah, so The Mist is just really fun. It's certainly one of Stephen King's weirder things because, you know, you can't normally make mist scary, but you know, Stephen King can make anything scary. But yeah, so The Mist is pretty good. And so the next story here is Here There Be Tigers. Okay, so Here There Be Tigers is the shortest story in Skeleton Crew, and I think it's about 5 pages, maybe 6, I don't know. It was about 9 minutes on the audiobook. And basically this one follows a child who has to go to the bathroom, but instead of going to the regular bathroom, he goes to the basements of his school, where there's like a secret bathroom under there, and he finds a tiger. So that's really it. I mean, it was a fast story. I'm very confused as to what it all means, but it certainly left an impression. But yeah, so Here There Be Tigers. It is odd, but I like it. So the third story is The Monkey. Okay, so obviously The Monkey is going to have a lot of attention soon with the new movie coming up next month, which, by the way, only sort of added to my interest of reading Skeleton Crew. I was already planning on reading Skeleton Crew before I was going to see the movie, but so the movie coming out just kind of heightened my interest in reading Skeleton Crew, so I'm ready for that. Anyway, so The Monkey is about a guy who finds a symbol monkey, you know, one of the symbol monkeys. And what's weird is that he remembers that he had the exact same one as a child, and it was creepy and doing stuff, so he got rid of it, and now it's back. And basically this monkey has a history of messing things up for people, like whoever's around this monkey ends up dead somehow. So yeah, that is a really interesting premise actually. You couldn't think that Stephen King could make a symbol monkey scary, but here we are. Anyway, so yeah, that was The Monkey. It was certainly something. And then the fourth story we have is Cain Rose Up. Ooh, an interesting one. So Cain Rose Up is, if you remember last year, I reviewed the Richard Bachman book, Rage, which was about a guy who brings a gun to school and fatally kills 2 teachers while keeping his class hostage. Well, Cain Rose Up is very similar to Rage, but it's not exactly the same. In which case, Cain Rose Up is about a guy named Kurt Garish. Yeah, his name's not Cain. That'll be explained in the book in case you're wondering. But anyway, he's coming back from a test at the end of college, either for winter break or summer break. I don't know which one, it doesn't say, at least not that I remember. And he seems to have failed the test pretty badly. But he just goes crazy, grabs a sniper rifle from his closet, and then just starts going on a killing spree. So yeah, obviously, if you've read Rage and this, you can see a lot of similarities between the two. I actually want to make a video where I discuss on why Cain Rose Up isn't out of print and Rage is, so that's going to be very interesting, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, so Cain Rose Up, it's a very short story. Well, duh, it's a collection of short stories and a couple novellas. But yeah, Cain Rose Up is a short story, and it's just very interesting, actually, of just what people just do when they're crazy. So yeah, I like it. Alright, so the fifth story we have here is Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. Ooh, okay. So Mrs. Todd's Shortcut is a little hard to describe without, like, spoiling it. But essentially, it's this guy telling a story about this woman named Mrs. Todd, and prior to her disappearance, she used to find these really good shortcuts that, like, cut travel time essentially in half, maybe even more. So, I mean, I'm just gonna tell you, wormholes. That's the best thing that I can find, basically. It's wormholes and stuff. She, like, can turn younger and stuff with them, but yeah. So, that was Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. It is a very weird one, but if you like science fiction stories, I think you'll get a kick out of this one. So, the next story on the list is The Jaunt. So, The Jaunt is Stephen King's word for teleportation. The Jaunt, the story takes place in the early 24th century, I believe, where teleportation is like a thing that everybody uses. And so basically, The Jaunt is just about this guy, while his family is waiting to be teleported to another place, tells his children about how teleportation was discovered. So basically, that's what The Jaunt is. It's just a guy telling a story of how teleportation was discovered. Again, if you're into science fiction, I think you'll really get a kick out of it. I thought it was interesting, actually. It was really interesting. It was fun. I like seeing how, like, fictional things are created in fictional books and stuff. So yeah, that was really interesting. And yeah, so The Jaunt is actually pretty good. And then the next story is The Wedding Gig. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't too into The Wedding Gig. It's basically about a guy who, this takes place in the 1920s, by the way, but it's about a guy who gets hired as, his band gets hired to play at this guy's sister's wedding, but she's, like, very obese, and then that's about it. They just play at her wedding and stuff. So yeah, it's not super interesting, at least I don't think it is. If you like historical fiction, I think you might like it more than I did, but I just wasn't that into it. Alright, so the next story we have is Paranoid a Chant. So there's not really a lot to say about this one. It's just kind of unrhyming poetry that Stephen King wrote about a man slowly losing his sanity. And that's about it. There's no story. It's just the journal entry of a man who's slowly losing his mind. So yeah, I mean, it's something, I guess. Alright, and then the next story we have is The Raft. Ooh, this is interesting. So basically, The Raft follows these four friends who go out to this raft thing on this beach for one last time before winter starts. And while on this raft, they discover, like, this black thing in the sea that they don't know what it is. They think it's maybe like an oil spot. I thought it was like maybe a stingray at first, but that's not end up what it was. It turns out it's some sort of creature that shows you colors while devouring you and eating you alive. Yeah, I know. That's insane. So basically, this entire story is just the four friends trying to survive whatever that is. So it's really interesting, actually, and yeah, that's probably one of the most Stephen King-like things in this entire collection, is just a black spot in the ocean that eats people. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's Stephen King, I guess. But okay, so the next one we have is Word Processor of the Gods. Ooh! So Word Processor of the Gods is actually one of my favorite stories, just because of how insane it is. So basically, this guy is going through his house, and he was given a gift by his nephew, who was unfortunately killed in a car accident, along with his mother and abusive father, who was also drinking. So basically, this guy, he's just like reminiscing about how like bad his brother was, but his wife and son are like cool. And then meanwhile, his own wife and son either don't particularly care about him or are just outright disrespectful. So what this word processor does is that, say, there's a bookshelf behind me. Press delete, boom, it's gone. And then if you say there's a bookshelf behind me, press enter, boom, it's back. So basically it can just change reality and stuff. And so this guy obviously uses it to change reality a little bit. But yeah, it's really entertaining. It is so weird, but let's be honest, that is totally something Stephen King would write. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So yeah, it's actually one of my favorites. I don't know if it is my favorite, but it's one of my favorites. All right, so the next story we have here is The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. So once again, this one is kind of a dud for me. I mean, it was okay, I guess. It's basically about a guy who once was cursed with killing anyone who he touched due to some sort of curse. I don't remember exactly what caused it. But anyway, if you like shook your hand, at some point you would die. And so he doesn't shake hands because he's afraid of that happening forever. So yeah, I mean, that's something, I guess. It's certainly original. I've never heard of that before in anything I've ever read or seen. But yeah, once again, you have to be like into fantasy and stuff to enjoy this, and I'm just not big in fantasy anymore, so that story just kind of more bored me than anything, and I just didn't understand it. So yeah, unfortunately, The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands is rather dull, at least to me. Alright, the next story we have is Beach World. Okay, so Beach World is actually interesting because I'm a big fan of Dune. Right there, there's Dune. Beach World is a lot like Dune in quite a few ways. It's like they both take place in a futuristic world. They both take place on planets with no water in sight. And they both involve the sand doing things to people. So yeah, basically, Beach World is about two guys. They're soldiers who crash land on this desert planet, and there's no water anywhere, so it's like Arrakis from Dune. And so they both start to go insane, but one goes fully insane and the other one snaps out of it. And then the one escapes, and then the one that goes crazy, he just starts eating sand, and that's it. It's a rather weird story, but I mean, it's enjoyable. If you like Dune like I do, then I think you'll really enjoy Beach World. All right, and then the next one is The Reaper's Image. So The Reaper's Image is also kind of a little lame for me. It's about a cursed mirror that supposedly, if you look into it, you see the Grim Reaper and then you die or something. And it's basically just like this museum curator telling stories about the mirror doing things like that while the guy's walking around with him and taking a tour of the museum. So there's not a lot to it. I mean, it's certainly interesting. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites at all. But I mean, it's not bad. It's a story, and that's all it is. It's just a story. So yeah. Next story is Nona. Okay, so Nona is very interesting just because of how confused I was after reading it. It's basically about this guy who was a college dropout, and basically he's in a roadside diner when he meets this amazing woman called Nona. And so after all this, he gets into a fight outside and then nearly kills a guy. So he and Nona escape on the road, and then the story's basically just them hitchhiking while Nona convincing this guy to violently murder people and steal their vehicles. And then there's the whole thing in the cemetery at the end. It's just a great story. Go read it. my description does not do it justice. It is insane, but I love it. It is a great story, and it's one of my favorites in this collection. So yeah, go read Nona, I guess. And the next one is For Owen. So yeah, this one isn't a story either. It's more just like a weird like poetry thing. It was written by Stephen King to his son Owen about going to school with anthropomorphic fruit. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you for that one. It's just a poetry, so if you don't like poetry, maybe skip that one. But hey, it's short and there's a live fruit, so I don't know what to tell you. All right, and so the next story is Survivor Type. Ooh, a really good one. So Stephen King has gone on record saying that Survivor Type is his favorite short story that he's ever written. Like, he said this himself. He loves Survivor Type. And Survivor Type is essentially about what the patient is willing to do to survive. So it's about this doctor guy who has a lot of heroin and is stuck on an island with no hope of escape. So what he does is, the book is just written entirely as journal entries from him about him marking the descent into madness that he is while on this island. And then Survivor Type, well, the story gets dark, and so you'll have to read it to find out. But I really like Survivor Type. It's short-ish. I think it's about the standard length for a story in Skeleton Crew. But it's short-ish, and there's never a dull moment. It is just a man slowly losing his sanity. And Stephen King has written a lot of books like that, and all of them are very good. So, yeah. So the next story is Uncle Otto's Truck. So, basically, Uncle Otto's Truck is about a Cresswell truck, I believe. I'm hoping my editor will put a picture of it like right here or something. But essentially it's about this guy who has an Uncle Otto. There's a guy named Uncle Otto, and he has a truck, and the truck is supposedly haunted and causes people to kill people. You know, if you ask me, that sounds a little bit like Christine, but okay. Anyway, so we've reviewed stuff like this before, you know, The Lawnmower Man, it's about a lawnmower that does weird things. Trucks, it's about trucks that do weird things just like this one. And then, of course, Christine, which is actually the next to be reviewed, by the way, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, so it's just another Stephen King tale about an evil vehicle causing chaos, and yeah, so it's not like the most entertaining thing in the world, but it's okay, I guess. Anyway, so the next story we have over here is Morning Deliveries of Milkman Number 1. So there's not a lot to Milkman Number 1. It's just about a milkman, obviously, who makes morning deliveries by giving people their milk while spiking them with several things, with either acid, poison, and sometimes spiders. So the milkman's kind of insane, and we don't know why. So that's basically it. It's really interesting, though. It's certainly something. So then the next story here is Big Wheels, a tale of the laundry game, Milkman Number 2. So basically, this one has less to do with the milkman than you might think, because of course the milkman was the main character in Milkman Number 1, but the main characters in this one are 3 guys, 2 of which are driving in a car late at night, and they need to get their car fixed or approved or something, and so they take it to the shop where the third main character, one of their friends, inspects the car, and then the whole story is basically just them reminiscing about old times. So essentially that's the entire story. It's just 3 friends reminiscing about old times, and then other people get involved and then also reminisce about old times. But then the milkman does show up again at the very end for like the last 2 pages, and then stuff happens. It's also just not as interesting as the first one, by the way, but yeah. Alright, so the next story is Grandma. So Grandma is very interesting. It follows a boy named George, and so he and his mother and brother are watching his grandma, who I guess lives with them, but his brother is in the hospital for breaking his ankle, I think. And so while his mother goes to the hospital to see his brother, he's basically left in charge of watching grandma, and some weird stuff happens from there. You know, it's your standard Stephen King story. A normal situation takes a not normal turn, and then stuff goes from there. I don't want to spoil it because it's just too insane to spoil. But yeah, so grandma is certainly something. Right, and then the next story here is The Ballad of the Flexible Bullets. So I'm going to be honest, The Ballad of the Flexible Bullets is, I think, my least favorite story in this entire collection. It's just basically 2 hours of just some guy, I think he's a literary editor, I think. He's just telling a story about how he found this really good story written by this guy named Reg Thorpe, and then he was just documenting Reg Thorpe's descent into madness for the entire story. And that's basically it. So, I mean, you'd think I would like something like that because I like descendants into madness stories. But The Ballad of the Flexible Bullet just didn't do it for me. It was told in like a weird story. It's like they're all at a barbecue and then this guy just starts randomly talking about it. So it's not like that's the actual story, it's just the guy telling the story. So it's very weird. I'm not a big fan of it, but you might be, so there you go. All right, and then the final story is called The Reach. So, The Reach is about this girl named Stella, and she is 95, and she lives on this place called Goat Island, and she has never left in her entire life. So her great-grandchildren are like, why have you never left? And so she tells them basically stories about the island and why she's never left. But one day, she has cancer, by the way, that's important. But one day, her cancer gets so bad that she starts seeing ghosts. And so she sees ghosts of like her dead best friend, her dead husband, and like all the other people that she's loved in life. So one day when she sees these ghosts, they finally convince her to cross the Reach, which is a body of water. Yeah, it's a body of water. To cross over from the island, because there's ice, over the ice on the Reach, over to the mainland. And so yeah, that's about it. But I mean, it's a super like emotional story. I think that people who like dramas will really like it. I certainly did. It's certainly one of the most heartwarming stories I've ever heard Stephen King write. So, yeah, The Reach is actually quite good. So, yeah. But anyway, that is Skeleton Crew, the collection. So, that about wraps up this video. So yeah, I enjoyed this collection for the most part. There were a couple duds in there, as I said, but for the most part, all these stories are pretty good. And if you like poetry, there's that in there too. But yeah, so yeah, that's the end of the video. But I will say, for a book called Skeleton Crew, there's no skeletons in there.
Not so fast, Ben.
Oh no! Oh no! Ah! Get away from me! Ah!